delay. I'm going to give it like 10 seconds. And then other insight Tim gave me was to when we sign off, that what is it, Tim? You got to wait about 10 seconds.
Yeah, it's whenever I know that there's a delay, obviously, between when we speak and YouTube gets it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no delay when you close the presentation. So you'll be in the middle of a sentence and it'll just stop.
All right.
So you need to give it some time to catch up before you turn it off.
All right. Well, good. Well, we're about 35 seconds into broadcasting. It looks like people can see us and hear us, so we'll get going as people come on in here. So last week, if you didn't catch it, I highly encourage you to go to the YouTube live section. It was on business planning with Gary. It's arguably one of my favorite topics of the year, probably his too. But it's just really, I think, a very important CyberCall to watch, and really, take kind of take inventory, right, Gary? Would you say of where you are, what went right and wrong in 2024, and are you doing something about it for 2025? Said differently, what would you say, Gary?
Yeah, Andrew, what I would say is the difference between building a thriving business that creates, passion and enthusiasm and purpose and financial stability for an opportunity for everybody involved, and not, is just really some principles and disciplines that we talked about. And if you put them in place, everyone can fulfill more of their potential. And, it's while I'm still hanging around the industry, Andrew, is to try to see if we can get a few more people moving in that direction, man.
Yeah. Really, really cool. And what did you say you'll end the year with in the peer group? How many? About
800 worldwide.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Good for you. Okay. So
you know me, Andrew, whenever someone says it can't be done, I'm in.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you remember in like 2011, you could do, you did it back when, managed services was early on. Remember that challenge?
Absolutely. Yeah. We had a lot of challenges, Andrew, we met along the way.
Absolutely. All right. Well, one of the things that you mentioned about, and I think Phyllis was asking you last week was, Gary, looking into the future, what should MSPs be focusing on if they're really going to have some differentiation? And you mentioned automation. You've mentioned it many times. We've talked about it many times on here, but you kind of led into, not only will we see automation continue to have massive impact on efficiency within the MSP, as far as, making them more profitable, but more secure when you're doing, secure onboarding, secure offboarding, and just, again, building better process in the business. But then you went on to say that you believe that as much of an impact as security was to MRR since the pandemic, taking average seat prices probably in the 150 range, now in the 250 to 300 range, you feel automation could be even a bigger opportunity on the revenue side of
So on the efficiency side, I feel like it's positive or negative. Like, if you don't progress with the industry, you'll be falling behind from a competitive standpoint. Because I'm saying to keep up, right, over time with competitors. It's not how you fix your inefficiencies. That should be done in other ways. This is going to be like almost like the internet or electricity. It's going to be just another layer that is built in. And then on the other side, there's a revenue opportunity that someone's going to get. Either the MSPs are going to get it or someone else. And we have such a competitive advantage, Andrew, in terms of owning the customer base. So our cost of sales is so low, and there's nobody else in the SMB that can do it. And when it gets unlocked, you're talking about, I think, adding 50% to the total addressable market for MSPs. That hasn't happened.
Yeah. It's really fascinating. It's exciting. It's fascinating. So one of the things I wanted to do, then I reached out to Tim at Roost and said, Tim, do you work, with a lot of MSPs. Is anybody on the fairway here? Are any of the MSPs starting to generate revenue with their customers when it comes to automation? And he said, absolutely. Let me see if Graham from SourcePath will come on. And lo and behold, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about both sides of the equation, Gary. So let's get on into it. So quick introductions. Graham, really appreciate you joining us today. Can you share a little about yourself? We'll go over to Tim and then hand it off to Gary.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Graham Rosenberg. Been in the MSP space since about 2016. Kind of have worn
when you were in grade school.
Yeah. Yeah. It was my first quote unquote real job, non-restaurant service related industry job. Even though I quickly learned MSP space is very service involved. When I first interviewed, I didn't think that was the case, but started as help desk technician, worked my way up to service delivery coordinator, then rose to director of operations, and now I'm over here at SourcePath as director of the Robotic Operations Center.
That's awesome.
That's awesome, man.
And you guys are
just to say that you have that role, like you have a role that didn't exist a few years ago. I love that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Go.
Yeah, so I worked for an MSP that was acquired by SourcePath last year, and this department did not exist before that acquisition. So we built it from the ground up over here.
Yeah, that's really cool. Tim, I know you're going to introduce yourself, but can you also, before you're done, talk about, we've seen vCISO, we've seen vCIO, vCISO, and talk about what you're starting to see in terms of, so many of this big ecosystem that you're creating, which is really exciting and fascinating. There's implementation companies, there's new departments, there's new roles. So Tim, kick it off in terms of who you are, and end it if you would there.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been in IT for quite a while now, since the mid 90s. Don't let my lack of as much gray as less gray than I had a week ago fool you. But it was about 2005. I started working for a company. Was not an MSP. It was a consulting company, but we became an MSP over time. Became pretty large. They've now got rolled into another conglomeration of MSPs. So been in the space for a while, seen it grow from nothing, being just a technician somewhere, to building out a managed services platform, and build voice over IP systems and everything that MSPs do. Then came over to the dark side a couple of years ago to come here to Roost, be a vendor. But it's been a lot of fun. Last week we were having a kind of a catch-up call with Graham, kind of looking through his environment, and I started to see all these integrations that had nothing to do with MSP things, like a Dun & Bradstreet, some accounting software, some other things. So we started talking about that, and thought he had a really good story to tell about automating for his customers. So that kind of leads into some of the things that we're working on. Yeah, we've had the vCIO program at MSPs for a while, and then when cybersecurity got big, and one thing that I built at the MSP I was at was a virtual CISO type engagement, where really the idea is just to have a seat at the table for those strategic discussions, right, Gary? Where we need to be that trusted advisor as an MSP to our customers, and allow, take off the sales hat and get into the business hat and talk about what is it going to take to drive your business forward. So with that, we're really starting to talk a lot about now is the virtual chief automation officer type role, right? Where we see chief automation officers a lot in upstream. Some of the Fortune 500 companies have them now, where we're ready to start having those conversations, leading the conversation on how to do these things at the SMB level.
Very cool. And then Gary, over to you. I mean, this is really what we've seen for years now, right? Things
Yep.
get adopted in enterprise and roll down, right? I mean, security is probably the biggest one where, someone like Phyllis has been doing it for, years and years and years at the enterprise and at government agencies, but really the MSPs in 2016-ish was when we started to glom on to, really starting to understand frameworks and the role of security really needed to play. So let me let you take it over from here, Guy.
Yeah, Andrew. And just like that, the difference is we're going to see this move faster than security. And even now, Andrew, I'm going to guesstimate, right, based on what we see, that at least conservatively half of MSPs really haven't seen the impact that they should from security services in terms of growth and profitability. And the other half have seen it. And then the top 15%, it literally has transformed their business. And I think we're going to see that seems to be the trend, right? Because there's a base level of like what we talked about on the last call in terms of, running a good business, understanding principles. And so I want to make sure we touch on some of those today with Tim and Graham. So Graham, I'll start with you just to kind of get started. Why did you get involved with RPA and automation? Like what made you personally decide to go down this path?
At the time, I didn't realize I was getting into RPA. I took over kind of running our PSA workflow rules at the time and realized how limited in fashion they were. And it's like, how can we take this to the next level? So we started playing with sending webhooks out of our PSA into Power Automate in Microsoft's ecosystem and just started building some very basic workflows. Like if this type of ticket comes in, send a Teams message to this channel. And that's really kind of how it began. From there, we dabbled a little bit into, and this is before the days of, the cloud radios and the other client portals out there. We just started building front-end forms for our customers to fill out. New user onboarding, user termination is kind of where that started. Originally, they were just creating tickets, and then we said, wait a second, we're getting this data in a very, easy to understand format, same format every single time. We can probably use this and start automating some things. And that's kind of how it began.
Yeah, that's super interesting, right? Like that's really how things do begin. You start in one direction and then you see what changed, like what other technologies are available, to extend it. But if you haven't done that, if you're not always pushing down those roads of efficiency, you don't discover things. Like I don't think you discover them in the same kind of way. So second question I have for you is, outside of RMM, there's a lot of manual process happening with MSPs, a lot, right? So talk about how you've seen automation maybe ease or eliminate some of that day-to-day stuff. How do you view it now that you spend all your time on this? So we're talking about the efficiency side now.
Yeah, totally. The biggest things we've taken in was not so much from an incident perspective, but from a request perspective. How can we streamline the intake of this information? And going back to before when I mentioned we started building front-end forms, we've started building these forms for everything, for laptop requests or anything that is just routine and a repetitive task. If we can build a front-end form, we can collect the data in a repeatable format, and now we can start either doing automated ordering or just proactive routing of tickets into the proper buckets and just eliminating hops as much as possible.
Yeah. Tim, let me ask you. So look, RPA AI is transforming every industry right now, but specifically, what are you seeing in terms of the biggest shifts for MSPs and how they're running their business with automation?
Yeah, I mean, it's so just watching the industry over the past year or so, it's really, automation has really moved from a nice to have to something that's really, you've got to be doing it. Used to be that automation is really just things like ticket processing and password resets and, other things like user onboards. But you're seeing a lot more people automate kind of those niche things that maybe they're the only ones doing. But those types of things are really what transform them from, just kind of following along and using a tool to being able to really build up their knowledge and learn how to build services for their customers. So that shift to not just building internally, but building externally is like the biggest thing that we're seeing. And it's really, it solidifies what you're doing with your customers. And then, there's that MRR that you get from it. Last week I met with a pretty recent partner who happens to be local. Just went and had lunch with them. And, automation was their foot in the door for a lot of these customers. They would talk to people that didn't necessarily have a lot of technology needs that they knew of. But having those conversations about taking their business processes that they have internally and speeding those up, that's where they really started to see value and were able to kind of close a lot of deals.
Hey, Gary, I mean, that last sentence or two, I mean, should really, like, every MSP should play that over and over and over.
Yeah, absolutely. Because think about it. Why are MSPs selling so much recurring revenue right now? Like, there's so much new logo relative to 4 years ago, because the conversations are easier for customers to understand around security. Like, that's the wedge that people use. And this is going to be the same thing. It's the next and another, and it ties right directly into security as well, right? So they're completely, related at the same time. But it's interesting what you said. Like, I think MSPs, and it's kind of like what Aaron, I think, calls the maturity model, your CEO. But when I think about it, it's like, okay, MSPs get it. The first thought is, how do I save time? And they focus on service desk mainly. Like, how, that's the biggest pain that they have. Like, that cost, per seat is too high for support. So how do I get better results? How do I do it faster? Then I think the second piece is they start to think about, right, how do they run their business better? Not just their support, like every aspect to make it their culture. Because I'm going to get you to talk about, centers of excellence. Then that, I think, is the prerequisite of where you said to start talking to customers and now have a perspective where you can ask the right questions. Tim, I was talking to someone who said they went to a customer that they have, one of their good customers, talking through what's some of the most annoying things here that you wish you could automate. And he brought up one thing that they had. I don't know exactly what it was, but it had to do with they shipped a lot of things. And there was a part of how they did that shipping that was manual. And it took like 5 minutes, but they did it like 100 times a day. And so they figured out how to make an automation for it. And, they didn't know how to charge. The guy's like, well, what do you want to charge me? He's like, well, what do you think you should pay? The guy's like, I can't even tell you how much time and mistakes were eliminated, like the time to do it. And then all the time to deal with the mistakes. And he almost would have paid anything for it. Are you starting to see those kind of things pop up with your customers more often?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing too, is a lot of people only look at the time it takes when something goes right, when they're looking at the value of an automation, and they're not factoring in how much time does it take to fix a mistake when someone makes it, and what does that mistake look like? What kind of egg is going to be on your face from that mistake? If you misspell someone's name in a user on board, that's a very simple, even understandable mistake, but what have you lost by making that mistake?
Yeah, to me, the accuracy is the most valuable piece. The time savings is just gravy.
I agree with you, Graham. Yeah, the accuracy and getting the same level of accuracy from every tech, whether they've been there 3 months or 3 years, right? Like that efficiency alone before you get, and I always say the same thing. Everyone keeps measuring, time savings, which is fine, but there's so much more, right? When you look at it, Graham.
Absolutely.
And really just, we always talk about, doing your internal automation first, which is good. But what you should be getting out of that is the stories that you're going to tell, especially when it comes due to the business processes that you automate. So when you automate your billing process, that's a story that you can go tell to your customers that, hey, we were able to do this. It's not an IT process typically. I mean, really, it's You know, we're taking some manual steps, things that you understand, and we're able to do this for ourselves. But Mr. Customer, we can easily do this for you as well.
Yeah.
What's the learning curve, Tim, that you've seen with, and I'm sure it varies based on the maturity level, like of the business, but so you can put some parameters around it. Like, what's the learning curve? Can it be plug and play, or is there, a process internally to maximize?
Yeah, some things are going to be plug and play. The simple automations that may come prepackaged, but the real benefit that you get is whenever you automate something that is a little bit more complex. And really, the real learning curve is more in the business mentality. There are technical skills to pick up, sure, but the skills that it takes to get your people together, identify what you need to be automating, what makes the most sense at the business level, and how to communicate with all the stakeholders in the company and prioritize and start to get these things built. And then turning around and doing that with your customers after you've learned how to do that. So, I mean, one of the things that Aaron loves to say, we like to pick on Aaron, especially when he's not around to defend himself, but he has these Aaronisms that he has, and he has his laws of automation. His first one, though, is you can't automate a process that doesn't exist. And the real, meaning behind that is if you try to automate without some intention and some processes that are behind it, you're just making things more complicated. You're not really solving the real problems. So that's the real learning curve there, is to get some intentionality behind it. Graham's done a great job. He has a great team that we meet with pretty regularly, and that's how they decide, what they're going to work on, whether it's something internally or something for their customers or some sort of a hybrid. And that's really the kind of biggest takeaway I have is make it strategic, not just learning a tool.
Yeah, and like if I'm an MSP, I'm listening today, and I'm going to play this back and listen to it again. But one thing I'm saying is Graham is here. Like, Graham is not the only person in his role in the MSP space. So when you start to see that, like you have to get going, Andrew. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, you're saying it's been legitimized. Graham's an exemplar, right? There's others out there that are doing it. And, if you think about it, what Tim just said about, you need to have a process to automate. You can't just come up with something without it being kind of written down. And here's our process right now. It leads itself into, maturity, Gary, which you've talked about often, right? Roles, processes. That's why the companies that, kind of think about things the way you talk about and have mentored companies for years is, okay, if I understand the role and process to do this and we've got it outlined, then we can look to see if we can automate that. And hence that's why you're seeing, those types, the maturity level of MSPs, direct correlation to, grabbing, RPA. So it's not that, by the way, that statement shouldn't be oh, shoot, we can't do it. It should be, hey, look, let's find others that are doing it. And Tim, maybe just a quick plug for The Rock and your Discord channel. Like, you guys help, like, everybody's there to help everybody. Like, it's not like, oh, we're so ahead of you, we're not going to help you. Everybody's helping. MSPs are helping MSPs, correct?
Oh, absolutely. We use Discord as our community platform, and just logging into that every day and seeing the questions that people ask and people piling in to help is just, such an awesome experience. And there's very little, things that people hold tight to their chest. They know that they're all struggling with the same things, and there's a lot of give and take on just the sharing and the helping with each other. People will build something and then give it out as an example. 9 times out of 10, you can't use exactly what they built because, your environment is going to be different, your processes are different, but there's just so much in there that's just inspirational, if nothing else, to give people ideas. Hey, I didn't even think about automating this thing. We could, we spend this amount of time on this all, every day. Yeah, this will save us tons of time.
Yep. I'm going to pass it over to Phyllis, but it almost reminds me what I see happening right now, like within our peer groups, within a peer, is the same thing. It's almost like they have a shared R&D effort. Like they're folks who head this up, and they're all different maturity levels, but they'll set up a weekly call. It's almost exactly what happened in the beginning when we were early on with Kaseya way back, and I was in a peer group. We had our teams that were meeting, and they were sharing what they were scripts and what they were doing, and we created probably a 2-year lead on the industry that we never really relinquished, Andrew, because we started growing because of it. And we never really relinquished that lead. That's the opportunity that's there, that's there now.
Yeah.
So Phyllis, I'm going to hand it over to you, and then I'll be back with a few more questions.
Sounds good.
Hey, Phyllis, by the way, if I could just say this, one thing Graham said about, efficiency is great about making mistakes. I wanted to chime in and say, I bet you the CISO of Okta and some of these others would, leaving service accounts open, wish they could get a redo on some of those, right? I mean, because that's right where we're seeing, again, it's hygiene. You talk about this all the time, right? Where the mistakes are made.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we used to, when I worked at the NSA and I led our security automation effort for a while. We used to say, like, we would say, the circle with the red thing, we should put a human in there. Like, sometimes you really don't want human in the loop, right? So often, especially with the customers who we dealt with, they'd be like, oh, I gotta make sure it happens. Like, I don't trust the machine. I've got to be there, set eyes on it, and then I'm going to click the button and make it happen. But that really it does kill, number one, the efficiency. And then number two, I really liked, the group pointed out, it also is the accuracy, right? So many times it's faster and then it can be more accurate. So Graham, when you talk about that with automation, of course, many people are like worried, oh my gosh, is my job in peril? What is it that, is automation going to take away my job? And what are your thoughts on that? And through your own experience, what can you tell other folks and other organizations?
Yeah, because every time something like this happens, MSPs get rid of all their people. Said no one.
Yeah, exactly.
Said no one. All they're doing is keep hiring more people. I wish they would hire less.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one thing that's true about the MSP space is we always have new challenges in front of us and a growing to-do list that doesn't seem to ever get any shorter. So I'd argue by automating some of this mundane work, getting rid of like the quote unquote easier tasks, you're freeing up your team to go focus on the things that requires a human to do, some brain power, some troubleshooting. I don't see it replacing any jobs. If anything, it's just going to help you scale and grow. And that goes for everybody.
And for MSPs, other industries, it will, right? In some industries, but in our industry and what we know about it, like the efficiencies are so underperformed that it's really going to help people get where they should be in a service business, hopefully, not run everything, at least not what we see now, right? The next 5 years.
I mean, it should be freeing up time for people to have more meaningful conversations, right? To, and get more information when they do have a conversation.
Right.
Well, if I could just say this, Phyllis, Gary, I mean, think about RMM, right? We're having the exact same conversation we had 20 years ago, literally. And what was the average size MSP then, Gary? Average. You guys were big. How many?
I mean, when we had 5,000, 5,000 endpoints under management, the average Kaseya customer had under 500.
Yeah. All I'm saying to Graham's point is, let's call, 204 into, even to 2015, 2017. What was the average size of the MSP? Getting larger or smaller? Is getting exponent now. Look at 2017 to now. Our MSP is getting larger or smaller. So it's
and it comes with, look, two things drive that. One is an SMB, a client base that's growing and thriving in an economy that we've had over the past decade. And then two is wedges, right? Security was the first wedge. And now this is the second big wedge. There's been smaller ones, but they're the two big wedges.
Mm-hmm.
So Graham, today we're talking about the benefits of automation, and I think we're making a pretty good case. However, there still are a lot of MSPs reluctant to adopt automation. And so how is it that we can help convince them today on this call it's worth the investment? And especially, with your own personal experience, you've had a lot of success monetizing it. So what is it that you would say to those MSPs still reluctant?
What I would say is start small. Find a kind of a simple process that you do on a regular basis and focus on automating that one process. And you'll quickly realize the ROI is just, it's great. The kind of quote, Tim's boss, Aaron, something that he loves to say is, sorry, I lost my train of thought there, but a lot of businesses just don't realize how accessible RPA is today. And it used to be enterprise only, and now it's accessible for everyone. And just focus, what Aaron would always say is the best automations are the ones you forget about. If you can set it and forget it, it just works in the background forever. So I would find one workflow that you want to build and automate, and you'll quickly realize the ROI on it and just want to build from there.
Yeah. And I think you guys talked about in the beginning of the call, like how help desk is just prime for the pickings for this kind of, for automation, and looking at where folks are spending kind of like someone said in the chat, the most mundane, repetitive work. But I also harken back to what we also talked about, these processes have to be written down first so that you could actually automate it. So maybe that could also be a stumbling block. And just out of curiosity, if that is a stumbling block, would you just recommend, hey, just go and write down this process? Like, what is it that an immature MSP can do to kind of go down that path? That's intimidating.
That's almost harder than building the workflow, is building the process. Getting everyone in the room to agree on what the exact process should be. That's the hardest part. Once you have it documented and you know exactly how the data should flow, how the process should flow, automating it, in my opinion, is pretty easy at that point.
Have you found what some people have told me is they realized that some of their processes weren't what they thought? Like they went to automate a process and then they were like, wait a minute, this doesn't even make sense. And they actually went back and what took the time was actually thinking through what the process should really look like, where the holes were, where the security issues were with it. Have you found that same thing, that you don't view process the same way once you're forced to systematize it?
Yeah, 100%. Something that, I learned that pretty quickly is, okay, if we're going to automate this, we have to build the process. I've gotten very good at Visio, drawing out these diagrams. Even when I'm brought into customer conversations or even just automating some processes internally, I'm the guy that's sharing out the Visio screen, and let's make sure we're all aligned about how this data is going to flow.
I think that's great. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah. Oh, Tim, were you going to say something?
Oh, I'm sorry. That was you, Andrew. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Ed in chat brought up a question. Tim, let me throw this to you, because I know you guys use AI quite a bit, and so Ed's like, how much will AI or won't, basically how much will or won't it play in automation? Is there a role for it? What are you seeing today? First you, Tim, and then you, Graham.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. We see a lot of it now. We have some of our pre-built automations are using AI to help with things like ticket triage and categorization and things like that. I think we're going to see a lot of this build out more as people really start to understand, how to feed an AI model with your own processes and your own data safely and responsibly. But there's a lot of opportunity there to get AI involved to help making decisions, pulling in information, and really just collecting data and making it into something that, even if the AI isn't going to make a decision, like Phil's talked earlier about, hey, I don't want the automation to do everything for me. I want to see it and then approve it and let it go forward. there's a lot of opportunity there to still speed things up and put a lot of automation and AI into a process, but you don't have to trust it 100% right away to use it. Do those things where there's some manual intervention so that you can tweak the process as you go through and allow it to really give you some value.
And how about you, Graham?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Tim was saying there. In today's landscape, AI really helps me and my team when we're trying to write these workflows, make sure we come up with the right expressions to make sure we're pulling the data that we're trying to pull. Even in workflow design, asking, the large language models to help design, this is what I'm trying to do. They'll help you design the workflows. Where I see it going, I see AI is going to supercharge RPA over the coming years. It's going to be almost synonymous in some ways. Whereas right now we have humans in roost building these workflows. I don't think that's ever going to go away, but I see it more so. You enter in kind of like a text prompt, like I want to automate a process that does A plus B plus C that ties into all these different tools, and you hit go and it's going to build 90% of it. I haven't seen Roost's roadmap, and I'm sure that's what they're working on, especially as Microsoft's talking big about Copilot agents and AI agents everywhere. Once these agents can start communicating with each other, it's just going to be up to us as humans to kind of just manage the whole process and not so much turning a wrench to the process.
Graham, could you see from a prompt engineering perspective saying, hey, act as a automation expert and look at this this equation or this script and see if you find any vulnerabilities or any holes in this? Like, will it be used as a QA as well?
I would argue you can almost use it as that today. I think if you fed in that data and you showed it, you could even take screenshots of your process and upload it to these chatbots and say, what do you see wrong? What do you see right? How would you make this more efficient?
Very good. Gary, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, look, and I think this is we'll see with other places. AI, I said earlier today, I kind of view it now as like a horizontal layer. Like there isn't a SaaS software that isn't starting or already has AI functionality built in. Mm-hmm. There isn't there isn't a SaaS software company that involved in their dev hasn't been impacted in a positive way, or a marketing department for that matter. Like, at this point, like we're still at the beginning, but those things are just, it's like any other technology that gets built in. And that's where I kind of separate, what AI is and what's happening with RPA, which is with the application.
Yeah. Phyllis, over to you. We certainly know the threat actors are getting good at using AI and automation for whether something's, available, a port's open or there's a vulnerability through Shodan, and they're certainly pretty good at it, aren't they?
Yeah, they're always ahead of the curve when it comes to the new technology and monetizing it for their purposes. It always seems they're more efficient, or at least maybe more motivated. Who knows? So, I think we already answered my next question for Graham about, automation freeing up people's time so they can be more customer focused and looking at, providing better quality of service. But Tim, we're talking about security, and of course, MSPs are focused on security right now. And what do you think the effect of automation is on security? Does it make it more secure? Does it introduce vulnerabilities? And what is it that MSPs should be aware of when they go to automate security processes?
Yeah, so a couple of things. When we're looking at security processes, like if we're doing like the CIS controls and 5 for account management, or if we're looking at continuous vulnerability management, like you can't do these things at scale without some kind of automation. Like it'd be impossible. So automation has to be part of, high maturity, high volume security in some form or fashion. But at the same time, when you build an automation, it's a lot like building software. In fact, it is building software. That's why At our Flow conference this year, we had Uncle Bob Martin, who teaches software developers about clean coding and responsibility and the responsibilities of software developers. There's a lot of even still kind of unspoken responsibilities when it comes to developing software. And again, automation is software development. At some point, someone's going to write a piece of code that kills 10,000 people. It's going to happen. So when we go through, the process of building automation, we need to understand a lot of those things. What are the implications of what you're building? Are you building these responsibly? If you're doing some sort of, security touching automation, do you have a peer who's going to review that automation with you and just give it another set of eyes? Make sure you're not leaving something out or making a mistake. So it's really important, as you build your automation out, as you build your, we'll call it a center of excellence or your ROC internally, to have a lot of those policies and some governance in play to make sure that you're automating responsibly, especially if you're using AI. Make sure you're doing this properly, and stick to the basic principles. You got least privilege. Make sure you're doing some regular audits of what you have, and make sure you're monitoring what automations are running and making sure that they're doing what you expect them to do.
I mean, I think those are great points. You need to have some kind of process, some procedures and governance around using automation, which many times is going to include AI. And, I'm so glad that you brought up those important points. And, Graham mentioned earlier, we know like some of the major cloud service providers and all these cloud platforms definitely have AI, but of course that also encompasses, of course, the automation. And so what kind of opportunities is that going to open up for MSPs and their clients?
Yeah, so I mean, I really love the shift to cloud-based apps, because typically that means that the APIs are going to be better than what we had with older type software. It should allow us to do more things with the application, automate more processes than we would be with some kind of a legacy app. And not only that, but with cloud infrastructure, if people are moving to that, automating those processes is really big, really huge. It's something that I did at the MSP before Roost came along. Was when we'd stand up infrastructure, we had a standard policy and process for doing that, and we're able to build those into the automation to do that. So again, it goes back to letting an automation do something, a script or an RPA workflow, handle all those steps, and that way it knows that, or that all the steps are going to be done. The automation doesn't know how to skip a step. It doesn't know how to make a typo and assign the wrong security policy to the wrong network interface. So there's a lot of benefits to that with keeping things secure, and just as far as applications go in the cloud, yes, there's just much better capabilities there than with things that are on-prem. Not that on-prem things couldn't be automated, but makes it much easier, much cleaner, and much more repeatable.
Sounds good. Thanks. Over to you, Gary.
Yeah. So, Graham, one thing I was thinking about as we're, talking through this, one of the issues we've had with security tools is signal noise. So you turn something on, and MSPs don't understand that it's going to, there's information that comes out of there. Many times it need to be reviewed. They're not counting that into its pricing. Maybe that creates other risks or concern based on volume. Is there any scenarios where you've been able to use automation to help deal with signal noise from things?
Absolutely. I mean, we do a lot of our workflows that we built internally aren't necessarily for customers, they're for us. And we can build in rule sets that, if a integration or if a vendor doesn't have a direct integration to our PSA, we can build our own integration almost and do some self-healing of alerts, or just routing alerts to the proper boards, and just reducing some of that noise. If we have tickets that can be auto closed every single time, historically a human had to do that. Now we can build those summary lines in, or these types of tickets into our workflows, and have them close right away. And on top of that, for the tickets that aren't noise, that need actionable, we can actually route them to not just the proper PSA board, but notify the correct people, tag people in teams, send the emails, do what we need to do to make sure we're staying on top of what we need to stay on top of.
Yeah, that's massive. I mean, that's a problem since the first day we turned on an RMM, 20 some whatever how many years ago it was. It's something that is just, with the proliferation of tools, has just continued.
Garrett, it was interesting. Graham just literally quoted you just again about 20 years later. He said, it's they're for us, not the customer. You remember your quote on when you after you sold MSP and you were helping MSPs, with True Methods just getting going, and people like, how do I sell this RMM, Gary?
Yeah, and I said, you don't. RMM is for us. It's not for them. Right. They get what they get is based on what it does for our service offering. They get the value in it, but the actual tool is for us. Same thing here. The tool of RPA is for us. They get the benefit. And so that kind of leads me to my next question. How have you seen, like, with everything that you've done with this program, how have you seen the customer relationship improve? Like, what's better about it? What has it done? And has it moved it in a positive direction?
Yeah, a couple different thoughts on that one. I think it's definitely moved in a positive direction because going back to what we were talking about earlier and the accuracy of what these workflows can give you, especially for like the high risk types of tickets like new user onboardings or offboardings. I'm sure every MSP has dealt with a client escalation because one of those didn't go as according to plan. Well, now if you can automate those away, those types of conversations aren't happening anymore, at least for those styles of tickets, right? Another thing, I think, kind of entering this new wave of the automation space is a lot of MSPs are now having client portals, whether they're outsourcing it or building it in-house. That's a wave that it used to be pick up the phone or send us an email, but now you can actually go to a website and look at knowledge base articles. You can submit forms that might be tied to an automated workflow on the back end. And it's just improved SLAs, response times, it's improved accuracy, and all of that ties into a better client experience.
Yeah, it's like what Aaron talks about is, these levels. One is, the automation is kicked off by a technician to make them more important. And then the second piece is it's kicked off by the client directly. That's more efficient. And then the last one is it really is completely handled by RPA. The RPA is looking, it recognizes a situation and takes care of it without the customer or the technician, having to get directly, involved with the beginning of that process.
So I'm not going to be complaining. Can I reach a human? Because I need to get this thing fixed. Like I had to with Verizon because my internet was so slow. Okay, good.
Yeah. Tim, so let's look ahead to 2025. I've said that, I think this is moving faster than where we were at the same time frame as security. So what are some of the big developments you see for RPA and automations for MSP? Will there be a plateau or are we far from that?
We're still pretty far from a plateau, I think. We've kind of beat up AI quite a bit, but that is going to be, much bigger thing we're going to see in 2025. And it's not going to be like just chat bots and things. We're going to be, using the machine learning, having it look through our data and look through our tickets and things to identify, places where we can automate more, identify processes that we can optimize even better, and to kind of help make some decisions as things progress through. We're going to see a lot more interoperability between platforms, I think. We're seeing vendors create better APIs than we used to. I think a big part of that is the push from MSPs to that are saying that they need these things. They're going to their vendors and saying, hey, I need to be able to automate this process. It's not, it's not enough for me to log into your platform and, type these things by hand. We're going to see, more automations that kind of go across different tools, and especially interacting with our customers and our customers' tools directly. And I think, looking at 2025, as an MSP, you're going to be, looking to make automation more of a strategic differentiator between yourself and your competition. It's not just going to be a tactic that you use internally.
I feel like by the end of 2025, the same way we were at one point, where if you're not having conversations in all your customer meetings about security, that's where we were. Then we got to say, hey, what are you doing? Now I'm saying by the end of this year, if you're not having conversations about automation and AI with every customer, you're going to be just as behind as you were then.
Yeah.
Graham, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think those conversations, myself, are a lot more fun, because it's kind of how, like, we talk a lot about this on the CyberCall, is you sit with your customer, and the first thing you should ask them is, how do you make money, right? And then you start attacking, okay, what slows you down from making money, and let them tell you, if you need to go sit and do a ride along with someone in a certain department, there's so much value that you can get from watching what they do. And a lot of people who are not used to automation, or used to, even IT and business process, you'll see things immediately that are like, oh, wow, you spend how long doing this every week? Hang on, give me 10 minutes, hold my coffee, and really start to show them how you can deliver a lot of value.
Yeah. So, Graham, what would success look like in 2025 for you in terms of your expectations of how you can move the needle at the business?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it's just getting more exposure out to our clients. We're automating some our clients that get it. And I kind of following with that pattern I mentioned earlier about automate one simple process so they can get bought in. I'd love just to get broader adoption from all our whole client base.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, usually what that means, especially you're a business at scale, and I work with some scaled businesses, it's really about changing that culture, working through the VCIOs, and really having it be part of that culture. Because once it's part of your culture, you will make it part of your customers. And once you've done enough of it, and the people that talk to customers start to get some pattern recognition, it becomes second nature. Tim mentioned stories, and I think that's important. You see something in their business, and you can tell a story about another customer. So I think there's like a level you need to get to before it's self-sustaining. Well, we're getting towards the top of the hour, and I want to see if, Graham, could you give an MSP who they're thinking about how to prepare for the next 12 to 18 months in terms of automation. If you could give one piece of advice based on everything you've learned, what would that be?
Find a resource that can dedicate time to learning what RPA is, and just let them fail. You're not going to get ROI right away. It's going to take them some time to get up to speed about just the vernacular, how the tools work, how APIs work, but make that investment. Find someone who's passionate about RPA, or who you feel they can get there, and let them stumble, let them fail, but make that investment in them. Yeah,
it's almost like if you can bring in, it's two things. One is if you can bring in expertise, that's the best scenario. But if not, like you said, just someone who's passionate, but accountability and focus, just like we talked about around security when, Tyler from Pace told the story. Like, that was the turning point when they had someone who was accountable and focused and started judging success based on it and having some metrics around it, is when their security posture changed. I think it's the same thing, Graham. So I think you're right on, man. Tim, what piece of advice would you give? And you have a different perspective, right? Because you get to deal with, thousands of MSPs.
Yeah, I mean, really, to add on to what Graham said, find people, allow them time to fail. I'd also say make sure that they're not living in a silo. They need to be interacting with the rest of the business. The business needs to have some idea of what they're working on and be able to share problems, because if you pick a technical person, he's only going to want to automate technical problems because that's all he understands. So they need to have those conversations with other people. You may need to bring a translator in at some point, but that's really important. Kind of on the flip side of that is, especially 2025 and beyond, we have and Graham talked about this a lot too with his portals and things, is the client experience needs to be enhanced. We need to get better at this. We have a lot of newer folks coming into business who grew up with technology. They're used to interacting with a portal and with a chat to get things done. They're not used to picking up the phone and talking to people.
Yep.
We still need to be good at communicating directly with people, but we need to cater to those who communicate in different ways than we're used to. So automation really kind of bridges that gap quite a bit between yourself and your customers for those people who just want something to be automated. They want to fill out a form and get a user added. They don't want to call you and tell you on the phone, how do you spell this guy's last name? So be prepared for that. Be working on those things. I want to leave with a piece of advice too. With cybersecurity, we talk a lot about, vendor risk management. Let's, talk to your vendors before you sign on about their security posture. I mentioned this before, but talk to your vendors about their APIs before you sign on. Make
100%.
sure that they have an API that allows you to automate your processes, even if you don't think you're going to automate them. If you have to go up to the super expensive enterprise plan to get it, keep that in your equation as to whether or not you're going to go with them. If you're going to, talk to somebody about an RMM, make sure that you can use their API to run commands on the RMM endpoints. If it's accounting software, ERP, make sure you can update an invoice and send invoices and, look at responses, whatever, things that an ERP is going to do for you that you might ever one day need to automate. So put that into your processes as you evaluate software for yourselves and for your customers. Being that VCIO, VCAO, this virtual chief automation officer, that's a big part of what you should be doing, is be in those conversations, help them make better decisions before making a bad one.
All right, Andrew, we're almost top of the hour. I got to bump to another one, but I tell you, the last 3 weeks, I feel like we've been on it.
Yeah, it's been really good. I like ending the year this way. I'm gonna put a quick,
and I want to do this one again, like maybe in 3 or 4 months, maybe have Graham and Tim come back. Yeah, and let's get an update, on things.
Yeah, and I put a URL in because this is an open community type event, almost like MSP GeekCon and Write a Boom. It's open. Roost sponsors an event called Flow. And I put that in there if you want to learn more about automation and do it in a way where it's safe and talk to a bunch of MSPs that are doing it. You can do it there, and you can do it very cost effectively. So with that, Tim, thanks a million for coming out and being with us. Graham, awesome meeting you, and you did fantastic. It was
great, Graham.
Really great insight for everybody. And Phyllis and Gary, as always, appreciate you guys coming on. Everybody, make it a fantastic week. Be safe, and we'll see you next Monday.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Tim, I'll keep it going here for 10 seconds or so we don't cut everybody off. I want to hear you, Tim.
Yeah, I'm watching the screen. I'd say about now. You can cut it.
All right. We'll end the stream.